Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-sirata mustaqim. Sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim. Ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum. It's so good to see everybody, or at least to see images of everybody who don't have their cameras on. So very excited to join you this afternoon on behalf of our resident Imam, Brother Imam Tariq El-Amin, the Talim Committee, Dr. Gloria Bashir, and Dr. Aisha El-Amin. I want to welcome you to today's Talim, where the topic is pandemic pondering, implications for education. We are very excited to have such an esteemed panel of educators. I like to call them my kinfolk, even though I don't necessarily know them personally. I know what it's like to be in the trenches, to be in those classrooms, serving our children, particularly our most vulnerable children. So very excited to be here with such a great panel of educators. And I think today is going to be a really robust conversation. And even though folks may not be able to join us right now, we know that we will be loading this Talim to our YouTube channel, Masjid Al-Taqwa. So folks who can't be here with us, inshallah, will have an opportunity to glean and benefit from some of the wisdom that's going to be shared today. So we have with us this afternoon Dean Fitzpatrick, Rasheedah Fitzpatrick, Sister Juanita Mahdi will be joining us briefly. We have Sister Cretia Rasul, and we have Dr. Lynne Muhammad with us. And in just a few minutes, I'm going to ask each one of our panelists to introduce themselves and give a little bit more of their professional background and share a little bit more of their experiences with us. But let me do just a little bit of housekeeping before we jump in. First of all, everyone's doing such a wonderful job. Please make sure that you mute yourselves when you're not speaking, and that goes for the panelists as well. We want to make sure that we are not trying to compete with a bunch of background noise. If you do not mute yourself, because I have the power of the mute button, I will mute you if need be. So please take care of that for me. Just to give you a sense of what today's discussion is going to go like. So I have a couple of prepared questions that I'm going to pose to our panel. But we would love, as usual, we would love if folks who are members of the audience would either put some questions in the chat or at the appropriate time take themselves off mute and ask some questions that they've been thinking about, right? We want to take advantage of the brilliance and the expertise that we have with us this morning. We only have, at this point, about 50 minutes. So, this time is going to go by very quickly. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have each of the panelists introduce themselves, and I'm going to serve as both moderator and referee. And for those who don't know me, I apologize. My name is Lionel Allen, Jr. I'm an educator as well, now in higher ed, but spent 20 years in the K-12 space as a teacher and as a school administrator. So this is a conversation that I'm very, very much interested in. Yes, panelists, if you feel comfortable turning on your cameras, absolutely. I do, I want to respect folks and their levels of comfort. But if you wouldn't mind turning on your cameras so that the folks can see your beautiful faces, I would really appreciate that. But no shame if you do not feel comfortable doing that. So why don't we get started now? And I'm going to ask that that Brother Dean Fitzpatrick introduces himself to our audience, and again, share just a little bit of your background and the position that you're currently in. So I'm going to turn it over to Brother Dean at this point, and then we'll follow up with Sister Rasheedah.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. How y'all doing? Yes, my name again is Dean Fitzpatrick. I am what we call a diverse learner specialist, commonly known as a special education teacher with Chicago Public Schools. I am currently I'm a literacy teacher for 6th through 8th. I'm currently at Libby Elementary on 53rd and Loomis. Been there going on my 6th year now, and just glad to be among you all.
Well, we're very, very fortunate to have you, dear brother. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
My name is Rasheedah Fitzpatrick. I have been teaching. I'm about to begin my 23rd year of teaching at the high school level. This will be my 16th year. I'm also a special ed teacher. I teach primarily science, physical science, and biology. And I'm happy to be amongst you all.
Great. Thank you for having us. Mr. Rasheedah has been on a couple of panels that I've moderated. We're very fortunate to have her voice as part of the conversation. I'm going to turn over to Cretia Rasul.
So I'm Cretia Rasul. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I've been in education for over 12 years. I taught kindergarten for 10. 4 years ago, I moved into administration. I was assistant principal of an elementary school. And then I moved into district office administration, where I'm now in charge of the district's pre-K programs.
Oh, no. So you crossed over to the dark side, huh? Oh, you became.
I crossed over to the dark side. I like it over there.
All right. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, sister. Thank you for being with us. We're looking forward to your contributions today. And last but not least, we're going to turn it over to Dr. Lynne Muhammad.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Lynne Muhammad, and I've been an educator for a few years. A couple of my students are actually on the panel as well as in the audience. So I'm not going to say how far back that goes, but I primarily teach biology related classes. This coming year, I have anatomy, physiology, and biology. Wow. And I've also served as a department chair, taught at the university level in several areas, special ed being one, and biology being the other. And my doctorate is in, it's a combination of curriculum development, special ed, and science. And I taught straight remote last year, so I spent the entire year on one side of the fence, but my students were live. I would say half of my students were live at the school. And then we ran a summer camp where we actually addressed some of the concerns that the children have been having with all of the ups and downs of social distancing, et cetera. So I'm bringing to this conversation various perspectives of what's going on.
Absolutely.
I look forward to helping today.
No, we appreciate your presence and are thankful for the work that you've put in over these last 3 or 4 years that you've been in education. Just a few years, right? So that's actually a great launching pad for us, Dr. Muhammad. So I'm actually going to start with you, if that's okay. Can you share with us what you've deemed to be the most challenging aspects of educating students during this pandemic, particularly being relegated to remote learning? Like, what have been the most challenging aspects from your vantage point? And then also, what are you hearing from your students?
To begin from a professional side, one of the benefits of schooling is that social development that occurs. The students are in a classroom with others that are their peers, academically, developmentally, their peers, and they're building off of each other. A lot of different strengths developed during this process. And sometimes we see a couple of weaknesses come out, but usually with professionals, we're able to, curtail that to a point and help that development occur. And when you have children isolated, where they're in their own homes or away from their peers, there is some type of, there's a level of discomfort amongst the children because they're used to that socialization, and then they're not developing those skills. So when they do go back into social settings, they can actually be entering those social settings with inept skills, not having the ability to function. When they're with their teachers, the social workers, the counselors, the administrators, we, because of our background in education, we can actually see a lot of those things that the children are developing. And if we need to tweak it a little bit or support them, we're able to do that. But when a parent loves their child, parents, we love our children, but we're also not the professionals in raising them at certain points in their development. And so when they're in these social settings with the professionals, we're able to jump in and do different things to kind of, make sure that they're developing correctly. So, and then sometimes as parents, we have our way of addressing things because we don't want certain skills to develop. But we as professionals, we recognize that when I'm doing this is a part of me developing another skill. So let me do it under the right supervision and I will be okay at the end. So many of our children are struggling with that. Academically, their academic performance also is enhanced by that social development. So when we have that interference, then we wind up having some difficulties. So as teachers, we are aware of that. And as administrators, our administrators are making sure that we're getting what we need to the best of the system's ability to be able to provide the children with that connection between home and school. If they did not have that full year, and if they had 1 month missing, there was still some level of their development that did not develop completely.
Yes, yeah, thank you. We talk a lot about academic loss in schools as we prepare to see students again in person. I think schools are readying themselves to address the quote unquote losses that students suffered academically, but we haven't talked nearly enough, in my opinion, about the losses related to social development. Sister Cretia, I'm gonna turn it over to you because your background and experience is with the babies, right? Those who are vulnerable and probably in most need of that social development. So can you talk a little bit about what you've seen as it relates to having to educate students remotely during this pandemic?
Absolutely. So the biggest issue has been what is developmentally appropriate. And when you're talking about our 3, 4, and 5-year-old population, what's developmentally appropriate is for them to have hands-on learning. And that learning is really set up through the curriculum. So in our school district, we're funded by the Illinois State Board of Education Preschool for All grant. And we are a no worksheet program. And so our students use a curriculum that really pushes them to be hands-on. And they weren't able to do that at home. Lots of times teachers were giving them tasks to try to speak to some of those things, but that learning and that socialization piece that Dr. Muhammad spoke about was really lacking. And then the other biggest concern that as administrators, especially at district level and building level that we have for our students, is that a lot of times the school is the refuge for the student. So if there's any type of at-home abuse going on, this student has been stuck in this for over 1.5 years. And so now we really need to address their social emotional learning and kind of fix or learn what that student needs.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm gonna turn it over to the Fitzpatricks because I know you're working with children who are a little bit older, and so the effects of the pandemic and the way students are responding to being constrained to learning in a remote environment is going to manifest themselves a little differently. So can the two of you talk about your experiences and what you've seen as it relates to challenges associated with the pandemic?
For me, it's been kind of the best of both worlds for me, because in some instance, some of my students who are very timid and very shy and may not speak up very much, and that still kind of came across a little bit even via Zoom. The Zoom did help them. It was like a nice safety wall for them to feel more comfortable with asking questions, because they know all eyes are not on them. They know that no matter what question, they had the option of saying, can I go in the breakout room? And if we go in the breakout room, that's when they can ask the questions. Whereas if we were in a classroom, they might have sat quietly and I never knew unless I came to them. So I had the benefit of that. And at the same time, I had the benefit of a lot of my children who have off-task behaviors or are easily stimulated by everything in the classroom because they were at home on their computer. They still had those temptations, but if their parent had taken care of that, then it made my job a little bit more easy.
Mm.
Now, at the same time, I could speak on what Dr. Lynn is saying, but you still don't know what they don't know. But I did find out there are a lot more online applications that I could do to find out how they're thinking about what I'm teaching them, like Class Kick. So, you know, so I found some apps that help me feel connected with them, even though, you know, I was speaking to them through a screen. So it kind of improved my teaching methods because it forced me to have to come up with other ways of engaging them and making sure that they understand it. So it's like, in one sense, it made me a better teacher because I was able to, like I said, enhance what I was teaching them and be able to give them immediate feedback and at the same time be present for them when nobody else was asking. Even if they didn't ask, I'm like, you want to break over all of them, give them that opportunity. Whereas if we were in the class, you know, just trying to see all of the students, you know, the quiet one, the one I got to mute, like you said, I had the mute button, and then the one that I just got to keep a close eye on because they might not say anything.
Yeah, yeah. Brother Dean.
Yes. Well, to me, it was. I found remote learning, you know, over the year and a half, to be kind of a mixed bag. You know, kind of piggyback on what Rasheedah said in the sense that it does. It did require me to be a little more creative. You know, so I mean, again, if you always look for, you know, the opportunities to, you know, improve as a teacher, you know, you're gonna look to, you know, find out what kind of ways, you know, you can go about keeping students engaged. And the other piece is just that engagement piece. You know, in my experience, you know, I had a couple of students that were very, they were very much present and engaged, but I would say I had a sizable portion of my caseload where it was a struggle. I mean, particularly this last year toward the tail end of the school year, just kind of, you know, you feel like you lose them a little bit as far as, you know, my district has an app called Go Guardian, where you can actually look and see what kids are, you know, what they're looking at. So I had to constantly, hey, get off of YouTube. Hey, that's not what we're doing right now, you know. So, you know, keeping kids engaged and not wanting to or feeling the need to go off into some distraction, you know, that was a constant challenge. But like I said, some days were better than others. But you know, that was pretty much my experience for this year and a half.
Yeah, Sister Rasheedah, you bring up an interesting point that I think it warrants some dialogue, and that is while we frame remote learning mostly in a negative sense, right? We know that there are students who thrive in remote learning, right? Like schools couldn't suspend kids, at least they weren't suspending them at the same rates. They weren't expelling students at the same rate. Students who struggled with disciplinary issues and conduct issues were no longer having those same struggles in a remote environment, right? So what do we do, or what do you think we should do as educators for those students who really saw greater success in the remote environment, had higher grades in the remote environment, are now thrust back into in-person classrooms? What do we do about that? How do we make sure that their needs are met as well?
Well, one of the things that we have tried, and I'm really kind of proud of my school, we're really trying to make sure the freshmen are brought in like to some warm arms and not like with some business as usual kind of thing. So we've tried to, we had like a night where it was just the freshmen that came in, just a fun night, period. Just like experience school and experience, you know, us just being nice to you. Because sometimes that's like the biggest barrier, whether or not I'm even going to buy into this. It's like, well, how did you treat me? And so, you know, they provided pizza, they provided, you know, they opened up the gym room and they played basketball and they, you know, they did some stuff and they socialized. And I think as long as we are being cognizant of the social emotional aspect of school, then that's how we get through this process. And we've been told, and the bottom line is it's like, this is 18 months that these children have not been in the building. So one of the things, the same thing, some of the things we had to do to engage the students via Zoom, like talk a certain way, make sure that you like, you're oozing sweetness to keep them engaged. So it's like, whereas I might have been like, hurry up and come on, you're like, but you don't want to lose them, right? Because once they're gone, I can't get you back. So you know how to keep yourself composed, keep yourself calm, and just like, that's all right. But those are the same things like I know now that I'm going to have to do to keep them when they're in my face. Because if it worked online, then it's going to do that much more when you're in person. So just understanding their frailties more, being more cognizant of that, and understanding like, hey, it's like a child that was ripped from your arms and then they're coming back. So how you gonna treat them? It's like, are you gonna treat them like they were ripped from your arms and you can't wait to have them back again? Or are you gonna treat them like you the one set them outside, in the first place? And didn't nobody tell you to come back in?
Right. No,
I think that's for me, and I'm seeing it from my school. I'm seeing it from the administrator, and then even as I'm having this conversation with you, I'm remembering like, what worked, Rasheedah? What didn't? When you said, "Boy, what you doing?" that?" And then I gotta pretend like it's a mama right there, because that also made me sure that I didn't say anything, because that mama will say, "Hey, why you talking about baby like that?" I'm like, you see how your baby is. Why you? But it's just seeing just us staying humane and kind and nurturing like we had to do online. I think if we do it in person, it's going to have that much more of an impact, and it's going to help us get through this hurdle.
Yeah, certainly remote learning brought our students' homes right into the school, but it also brought the classrooms into the homes, right? So everybody got their real education and got a chance to see how things function. Dr. Muhammad, I know you want to jump in, please.
I concur with what was stated before. I'm also adding that the school district, prior to, and this is not just the district I work for, I think this is unanimous across the United States because of how the federal system works, but they're number driven. And so they need to start administering more exams, the same exams they were doing before, maybe some modifications of them or whatever. And so they're number driven, and they need the scores to be where they are so that they can get their state funding. So this whole thing about social emotional is real, and we all recognize it's real, but I'm also, just being a realist right now. I've been in this system for a number of years, that the focus is going to eventually get back to more of the academic number crunching thing as opposed to dealing with the whole child. So while I'm talking to this specific audience, I'm talking to the choir right now, I think that part of the responsibility of making sure that that social and emotional development continues to be addressed is looking at the other members of our, the stakeholders, the family, and in this situation, the community, and the Taqwa Center's efforts and other community efforts that are being done to make sure that that's happening, that cushion is there. So the village concept is rising to the surface. Our model in the last couple of years during the pandemic has been, for the summer camp that I run, recess, so take a break, to reset, so that you can go back into what you have to do next year in the fall. And that recess piece gives you a chance to recheck and retool and all of that. Well, our partners in this situation, the community programs, the parenting groups, the special programs for our teens, our preteens and younger, these programs can help them do that in a way where they don't have to wait for a particular time of the year to have their recess. They can actually be recessing, stepping back and getting retooled, weekly and, every other day if necessary. So we're comfortable with Zoom. We're comfortable with other mechanisms to do these conferences. So I'm thinking that it's beneficial to have those developmental groups having their recess time several times during the month, possibly, and making sure that that strengthening is continuing to occur, that whatever frailties may have occurred, that, you know, that we're able to, you know, to erase those things and be able to move forward. And I was, you know, as Sister Cretia was talking about the babies needing to have that hands-on. Our older ones need hands-on. Our older ones in, you know, the STEM classes, you know, you can't just do it off of Google Classroom. You've got to, and videos, they've got to touch and squeeze and build and have that uh-oh moment, or the oops, I didn't mean to do that, let me try it again moment. And, you know, so even, you know, the community aspect of us giving them some of that, because again, it's going to be about test taking, and the test taking doesn't necessarily include some of those developmental things that we know that the children need. So I agree with Sister Rasheedah. I actually started to type a message to her. She was talking how proud I was of her as a, you know, as a teacher, because, you know, some of the stuff that, you know, we try to emulate in the programs that I've taught her in. But, you know, one of the things that she said was this made her evaluate herself as a teacher and reevaluate her own skills, and to be able to learn from that. And that is the sign of a great learner and a really, really great teacher. So, you know, as parents, we're reevaluating, as community organizers, we're reevaluating, as educators, we're reevaluating, but it's all about that village. It's all about the village concept.
Absolutely. I'm going to pick on Cretia, if she doesn't mind. Dr. Muhammad brought up a very interesting point, and that is eventually we're going to regress to the mean, that we will go back to doing school the way we've always done it, right? And that we will become hyper-focused on standardized test scores and student outcomes. As a district level leader, how will you work with your fellow district leaders to ensure that we continue to prioritize social emotional learning and the mental and social health and well-being of our students, and not sort of regress back to what we've always done, which is to, you know, test scores over everything, kind of a learning environment for our students?
Yeah, I agree. And I do believe that eventually we will get back there. And I don't think it's by choice. I think it's by force that eventually we will get back to being data driven and really looking at those numbers, because test scores are required by the state, and that's how we get our funding. So I think we don't really have a choice to do that. But I know, particularly in my district, they just hired a new MTSS coordinator who is really working on making sure that we have social emotional components in the classroom that will stick, like Calm Classroom and teaching children how to be mindful. And that's pre-K through 12. And then our social emotional curriculum that we use, which is second step. And I think if we really just make sure that in all of our curriculum areas, that yes, we're teaching content, but we're also looking at our students' development and their needs, I think we can all win. We can satisfy the state with what they want, and we can also still support our students, no matter what grade level they're at.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think those are really important points to be amplified, that this notion that we can have both, right? Like we can create these rigorous learning environments and still be committed to ensuring that our students have the proper SEL support that they need to prosper within our schools. So let's turn the table a little bit. You know, we talked about the things that we're concerned with, and we talked about the importance of socialization and the lack of socialization and how that is going to be potentially problematic for our students. Is there anything that children have gained of going through this global pandemic? Is there anything as educators that we can build upon when they return to in-person learning? And for some people, they're already in in-person learning, but in just a few weeks. Go ahead, Dr. Muhammad, jump in.
One of the things that I think that has really been a plus for my students is the comfort level of using technology for more than just video gaming, and learning how to troubleshoot through the technical world in a way where they're being successful. To have a 7-year-old know how to do photo editing and put a photo into a document and then send it is great. I mean, but before that, I had 9th graders, I had 11th graders who couldn't do that. And now, you know, because of this past year, they're pretty good at it. To also get them to respect the piece of technology that they're using, because once it breaks, you're in trouble. So that teaches, you know, a little bit of self-control and, you know, and self-care and care for and respect, and the whole idea of respecting, you know, not just your personal stuff, but stuff that may belong to you and to others. The whole idea of the classroom family, if you get muted by your teacher, that's a little, you know, that's hard to take, but it teaches you that I can't dominate this conversation. And also for that child who's not speaking up, to have that breakout room option, and then to get the support that they need. It just empowered them even more to know my teacher is paying attention to me. And even though I may not know it, he or she does care. And so that's also there. But also we were flexible with our assignments as far as due dates and maybe the nature of how the assignment was going to be done, because we as teachers recognized that everybody was not on the same even keel with resources and et cetera. One of my students, she barely spoke, and I was like, turn on your camera or turn on your mic and stop sending these chat messages in. When she turned on her mic, I heard the confusion that she was dealing with. And the headset was not able to deafen at all, you know, so, you know, to be sensitive to that, but the child knew that I cared. And when I made that adjustment for them to be able to continue to chat to me, they also saw that they had, if I had spoken up about it, my teacher actually could do something about it. So gaining that sense of trust in staff, I think, was a great piece. And like Sister Rasheedah mentioned, and Brother Dean, some children did extremely well. And so finding a way to make sure that we, you know, use multiple methods of teaching, multiple modalities and multiple methods of receiving the word, giving and receiving the word from the children, that's on us to do. But if we can continue to do that, we'll still get the positives out of the deal. So I think it was a great learning experience on the side of us to make sure that our students continue to succeed in the way that they did. And we empowered them this year, I think. Many of them became empowered.
Yeah. You know, my fear is that we already have such low expectations for African-American and Latino children. And I'm already hearing the murmurings that are really fueled by sort of deficit orientations of Black and brown kids, right? And so my fear is that they're going to lower those expectations even more because the narrative is so negative. The narrative is that the kids haven't gotten anything, right? No learning because of this pandemic. Go ahead, Rasheedah and Dean, jump on in here.
One of the things that was also extremely helpful as a parent, and hopefully other parents were able to see, they were able to see what kind of a learner they had. Whereas before, it was all one-sided. It was like, what happened? The kid come home and tell you their side of the story, but you had no idea about all of the stuff that they did before that happened. So I think one of the benefits, and no for me, is I got a better understanding of how my children learn and how they conduct themselves in the class. And then I also got a better idea about what works for my children. So if the parents were trying to, if they got anything out of it, they should have learned more about their child and more about how they learn and what works best for them and what assistance they can hopefully offer further down the line, knowing that after all these 18 months, what you saw is not going to get fixed, you know, when they come into the classroom. So, and I think the students learn what kind of learner they are. You know, how do I learn best? And, you know, I got to see firsthand based on the interactions that I had or the engagement I had, which one of the ways of presenting information was the most effective. So they know what was most effective with them, because they would turn around and say, well, can we have this? Can you present it this way? Whereas before we didn't have any of that. We just had, well, I gotta learn this. But at least now it's like, okay, can you give us a quiz? Can you give us a class kit? Can you give us a Kahoot or Ed puzzle? So they know more about how they receive the information best.
Yeah.
And how to be able to demonstrate what they know best. So
Yeah.
that's something that they didn't have control of. I mean, some students knew, like, sometimes they would say, can we just have this and can we just have that? But this is like, it wasn't like, can we just watch a movie so I don't talk, kind of thing. It was just, this is like, which way of presenting the information works best for me. And for my students,
Yeah.
who typically, they were able to experience the different ways of teaching in all their classes because they had to. It's not like I could teach them all these different things and with these different modalities. And then when they went to another teacher, they had to write a paper, it was a pencil paper activity. We all were engaging those students in those different ways of getting information and receiving it. And that made us, and I believe the students, more likely to want to engage.
Yeah.
Before they might have been like, all she gonna do is talk. All she gonna do is give lecture. All she gonna do is give notes. And couldn't nobody make her do anything different. That was her classroom. You weren't forced to change how you present your information. This year we were forced. If we wanted to get increased engagement, we had to figure it out. So that empowered the children more than before. They just had to take over whatever was given. And if you didn't like it, you get over it.
Right.
Kind of thing.
So what I'm hearing you say is that students have greater ownership of their learning and more self-awareness, the ways in which
yes.
That's powerful.
And that's something that if you could get that now, how much further will you be able to, take it and run with it? Whereas before, you can go through the whole time of your education and saying, man, if you had just taught it to me this way, I might have got it.
Yeah.
If I had an option, or if I had another way you could have presented them instead of this one way, I would have gone somewhere. I would have liked school more. I would have wanted to go to school more. All of those different factors.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just wanted to add real quick, just from a big picture perspective, a 30,000-foot view, as far as what positive came out of the pandemic for me, for students and teachers for that matter, is just the idea of being flexible. I mean, this particular cohort of students, is the first in history that has gone through this. I mean, we don't know obviously what the future holds. If this is being, knock on wood, an ongoing concern. But I mean, this is the first time that we've ever dealt with this. And teachers had to come up with lessons on the fly. Students had to. I mean, for the students that really embraced it, I believe they got a lot out of it, in my personal opinion, because again, just because you do have that that the technology piece that they were already, at least in my particular building, they were already exposed to, prior to the pandemic. But now they were put in a position where they had to, well, first of all, teachers had to, discovered, doing different ways to engage your students. For if you're talking about a site like Flipgrid, where my particular population, I didn't, I dealt with students that had learning disabilities, and found out that writing didn't necessarily work, no matter how much I tried, because I've always, me being a writer, I've always tried to really be, I always in person would, I make that cornerstone of my practice. But didn't get away from so much as I just found a new way of conveying it with Flipgrid. I used to like this one where I would pose a question to kids, and opposed to having them actually type their answers out, they were able to do a video, and most of them found it a much more accessible way of expressing their learning. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I don't know if non-educators understand the magnitude of what was required of schools and school districts because of the pandemic. I mean, we're talking about schools being transformed from traditional brick and mortar institutions into virtual schools in a weekend, right? For most districts, the last day of in-person instruction in 2020 was March 13th. By March 17th, teachers were expected to be up and running using virtual platforms. That's unheard of, right? And if you told teachers that they would be doing that, 3 years ago, they probably would have, laughed you out the room, right? So you're absolutely right. It did force people outside of their comfort zones in real and substantial ways. Cretia, you had your hand up for a while. Come on in, sis.
Yeah, I just wanted to circle back to something you said about the academic achievement of our Black and Brown students. So in the school district that I work at in the northern suburbs, the Black students are the lowest achieving students. And actually during this pandemic, the board decided to lower the graduation requirements to allow these students to graduate. Which caused a bit of an uproar within the community. And of course, I have my own opinions about that. But I really think that although we do need to continue to work on that social emotional piece as we've been talking about, I think we really need to refocus on some of that rigor for our students, because we can't teach them that because we go through something, we're going to lower the standards for them. And especially when their achievement was low prior to the pandemic already. So we really need to look at what strengths they had during this remote learning, whether it was, working on their own or really enjoying this online platform and building on it. And we need to find that for each individual student so that we can boost their learning.
Yeah. Dr. Muhammad.
Yes, I wanted to address that same situation as Sister Cretia is talking about from the classroom. When I started canvassing my students who were doing very well versus those who were struggling, and I'm looking at both seniors who were there in the same school together face to face before the pandemic, and then they had to be forced into remote, versus those who came in as freshmen who had never really developed their social niche and came in green, coming from schools all over the district as elementary schools into this one setting. And for any high schooler, that is hard. But then to do it in a way where the people that are also in that meet with you, you've never really met them or got to socialize with them, et cetera. So I'm looking at both sides of this, but the children, the marginalized or Black and Brown children that I noticed that were struggling, majority of it was because their internet system was not as strong as it needed to be, and their signal was going in and out, which is an economic issue for many of them. Mm-hmm. Their home life might have been such where they had to take care of a younger sibling. One person, she was in the hospital with her grandmother regularly as the translator because her mother did not speak English, her grandmother did not speak English, and she was the only one available to do the translations. So these children had quote unquote baggage that continued at the beginning of the school day till the end of the school day. Whereas if they, as Sister Cretia mentioned, the school is a safe haven for many children and they couldn't just turn it off and go to school. It followed them into that. One girl was in a closet sitting on the floor using the clothes in that closet as a sound barrier to try to keep the noise that was on the other side of that wall from coming through into the classroom when she had to turn on her mic. So, these are children who had more so economic concerns that were interfering. And if we can, at least recognize and make it very, very clear, this is not their and their potential. This is not their intellectual level. This is us providing more of a direct level of support to these children when they're doing their homework, when they are, when we're back to face and face where everybody's fully in school, when they're doing their homework, when they're doing all these other things that they need to do to make sure that they have that preparation to be successful as we decide to go back to getting those test scores, high like we need them to be. And lowering the standards is not addressing that. That definitely is not addressing that. We need to keep the standards there. We need to keep the rigor there, but we have to look at how we support them as they're trying to learn and demonstrate what they have learned. And just like we had that flexibility with with choosing to use this modality versus that modality in teaching, our assessment tools also need to be flexible so we can make sure that we address the skills, but not, we are teaching the skills, we're assessing the skills, but we're not using just one method of getting that data from the children because of the different levels of preparation that they've had prior to. That's not lowering the standards, it's keeping the standards high, just using different modalities to get from the children what we need to get from them.
Yes, yes. I had a couple comments in the chat. One was from Sister Hakima, who was in the Amen corner, Rasheedah, when you made the point around this pandemic and remote learning has increased her understanding, all right, around what works best for her child, when her, how does her child learn best, what works best for her. And I think we can say that about all of our children, right? We know what works. Like I for sure know that having, my youngest sitting in front of a computer for 8 hours a day does not work. Like that is, was fundamentally clear as a result of this pandemic. And then Dr. Aisha, she says that, at her university, that African-American students actually did better than other demographic groups during the pandemic. And that just makes me think about how hostile some of these learning spaces are for children of color, right? That the environment is so hostile that them not being in it is actually to their benefit, right? As we talk about how, unfortunately difficult this has been for so many students, others of that we serve are really benefiting and really excelling because of it. We only have 7 minutes, right? So I want to close out with the final question. I want to ask all of the panelists to get in and get out, if you will. But this is about, parents and families, and this is something that all of the folks who are participating in this Talim can benefit from. What advice, and I'm just going to ask each of you to chime in, and I'm going to call on you in just a few minutes, but what advice do you have for parents and families as they prepare to send their children back to school for in-person learning? Why don't we start with Sister Cretia? What advice do you have for parents and families?
My two biggest pieces of advice would be to be patient as teachers are trying to make things better for students because they understand the changes that have happened. And especially for the younger students and the parents of younger students, please don't send your kids to school sick. Even if you think it's just a cold, it could be anything, and you're really potentially putting an entire building at risk. So I get you have to go to work. I get that, but just don't send your kids to school sick.
Yeah, I think those days are over, right? I don't know how many. So. Right, I don't know how many of you had one of those mamas where if you weren't about to die, you was going to school that day. Like you had to have 117-degree temperature in order to be able to stay home. Like I think those days are over. At least let's hope so. Sister Rasheedah and Brother Dean, what advice do you have? We have from Sister Cretia, be patient with teachers. Don't send your children to school sick. What advice do you have for parents?
I would say advocate now for your child with more of a better understanding, not just from an emotional standpoint. Mm-hmm. So don't just say that's not my kid don't act like that, but actually share with the new teacher what you have learned, because that new teacher didn't get to see what you saw. So instead of coming at the teacher, take the information that you were able to learn about your child and actually advocate constructively and not emotionally.
And from the first thing I'm just thinking about is just, as you get ready to start the new year, just, getting the kids back into a routine, because they've been for so long. I think, many of us could probably say that it's a difference from working from home, whether you're talking about a teacher or a student. There's certain liberties that you take that, that you maybe not, you're not able to take at work or at school. And just going back into, going back to the building and getting back into the swing of things, that I can already foresee it being, a bit of a challenge, for kids who haven't been in the building physically for, again, 18 months. Although we do have, or at least in my building, we had, maybe a third of our students actually did come in the third quarter. But yeah, just mainly, I would say just really work on, just trying to get it back in the swing of things, early bedtimes again, and just just to get them out of summer mode.
So what I'm hearing you say, Brother Dean, is put some structures in place that's going to help ease the transition from 18 months of remote learning back to in-person learning.
Yes.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. That's very helpful. Dr. Muhammad, bring us home.
So I'm putting on my mask and I'm going to talk to the parents about the older children. And if the older children are nearby, I'm hoping that they're listening. So we have to take this seriously. And in biology, I have this acronym that I do on the board. Teachers, we do a lot of acronyms. So my acronym is VIABLE. They are a very, 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 very important part of a community. And that community is only as good as the structure that allows the members of that community to mature, to be able to be a contributor to the community eventually. So if they're not contributing to the community over time, then that means that the community system is not strong. So the community itself is not viable. Where they're in a viable community, they themselves represent viability as well as the community that they are a part of, be it their family, the larger community, whatever it is. So if they're in a viable community, they have to be connected to life and the reality of life. And life being represented by the color green or verde, and then the truth that goes along with sustaining that life or veritas. That they have been given the ability to use their reasoning and their intellect to be able to do specific things. And when they step into that classroom, when they step into the hallways, when they're around their peers, they need to use that intellect at the same time. This is real, and they need to use their intellect to progress through this, whatever the challenges are that they're facing. They are equipped. They are able-bodied. They've been given a foundation by their parents. They've been given a foundation by the community. They've been given a foundation by the educational program. They are equipped. They are also leaders, and they can take that level of able-bodiedness and help their peers, help themselves. Believing in Allah as the God of everything, and He has our back, having that faith allows us to pursue and not be so scared that we're just stopped and we cannot progress any further. So to make sure that our Taqwa is there and to make sure that it's guiding us and our peers through whatever they're going through when they get into the school system or just in their social settings. Loving themselves and loving others. If I love myself, I'm going to take care of myself. I am going to make sure that I am protected. I do not want to bring this home to my family. I do not want to give it to my friends. I am going to protect myself so that I can protect others around me. And then that whole concept of this is me. Well, I am not alone and I am not by myself. So I couldn't find another word for E. So I went to the Arabic, the suffix that we put on words. So my house or Beiti. So I use that concept to let them know that they are part of, yes, they have to focus on me, but they're part of a larger me, which is the community, which is their family. If they bring this virus home because they were careless in the school, then that's going to affect everybody in their house. If they bring the virus home, then it's probably going to eventually be back in the school or when they return, if they return back too soon. So this, if they care about themselves, then they should care about everybody around them. So wearing their mask correctly, following the school rules correctly, not using that idea that I am bigger, better than this virus and I'm going to blah, blah, blah. Yes, you are bigger and better, but you've got to use all of these things to make sure that we conquer this eventually.
There's nothing else that needs to be said. If I had a mic, I would drop it. I mean, that's what I would do right now. Thank you, Dr. Muhammad, for that wisdom. Let's give it up for the panelists. Can we give them a virtual round of applause for sharing their wisdom, and as Dr. Aisha said, also sharing their heart. We thank you for your commitment to our children. Thank you for coming back. Less brave individuals would have walked away after the past 18 months and said, let me find out how long I could live out of my savings. So I can figure out something else to do with my life. So thank you for your commitment to our children, and thank you for spending such valuable time with us today, during today's Ta'aleem. Let's close out with Walas. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Walas. Inna al-insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihati wa tawasaw bil haqq watawasa bis sabr. Ameen.